When mankind shook hands with the drought. A short story to an ongoing problem of modern times by Christopher Reusch, B.Sc, Environmental Protection. Once upon a not so far away time, there gurgled the rivers and streams, and rain poured down on roofs and heads alike, which some greeted with moaning and irritation, as they much rather wanted to have eternal sunshine instead of this dreary, rainy weather. One day a seer came and talked to the people. "What shall you do, my good people, when the rain will stop falling in a few years? Will you look back and admit your mistakes? Or will you remain stubborn and foolish and continue to commit one blunder after another?" There stepped forth the man from the crowd and said, "What dost we care for your words? Only yesterday it rained, and the crops on our fields are promising another rich harvest. When there is something to complain about, then I shall name only your constant nagging, which is a nuisance to us who prefer to be left alone." The crowd jubilated and broke out into spasms of applause, for they believed the seer to have lost. But alas, once again he raised his voice and spoke thus: "I warn you so that you may have heard. The trees which you cut down and chop up to fire your ovens and to fatten the accounts of your banks are those that make it rain. For rainmakers they are called in other tongues. Continue to listen to the greedy lips of your politicians and do as they say, and in a few years you will experience what I already know today. Your rivers will run dry, and fear will live in your hearts. For what will you drink? And how will your crops grow when the rain ceases and even the deepest wells stop gurgling?" Yah, go to hell, old man. Why shall we care for the sorrows of tomorrow? Today I have eaten well and I feel content. As for your speeches, they may well be illusions to lead us into a trap. For the sake of peace, leave us, or we may remember some old practices for false prophets. With this the crowd separated, while the seer remained alone, but far from being beaten. For those who already know what will happen may prepare themselves for what is to come, without being herded by the whips of some unconscious deep-buried fear. And thus he went and spoke to those who wished to hear the words of crows, which indeed were hardly a lot. The years passed, and the seer remained unseen by those who rejected him. His bare feet carried him far into areas that once used to be forests full of life. But what he saw was far from soothing. He remembered countless springs of clear water that had either run dry already, or were merely dripping sadly instead of bubbling happily. Trees were being felled wherever he went, and the first signs of prolonged drought already showed in the midst of the forest. The mountain ash berries, for instance, were traditionally harvested after the first frosts had come, while last year there were no mountain ash berries to be found in the beginning of October, which is highly unusual. Winding and soft trails as well as earthy forest roads had been broadened to 3 meters in width and entirely covered with gravel, which is basically hell to all hikers with or without shoes. Many landowners had chosen this option as it had been decreed by law that it was the only way to receive funding for road maintenance in forest areas. What inspired such a decree is obvious. Easier penetration into forest areas to smoothen the process of deporting resources as well as importing them at a later stage. The first would be to kill and sell trees, while the latter to start selling attractive properties plastered with houses that exude an air of look how privileged we are with our new and shiny, closer to nature than others, low-energy buildings, which wasted more energy to be built than they will ever save. Only the mobbish part of humankind was blind to such developments, as they much rather lost themselves in front of screens than to engage with the natural world. Whatever their reasons were, they were far from feeling liberated. Some occasionally remembered the seer from years ago, especially after prolonged times without rain had increased their sorrows and fears to an unbearable degree. In such moments they almost felt as though they wanted to know the truth, and not one but many kept a lookout for the return of the bearded man with the piercing glance. Only he had moved on to more secluded areas where he could live in peace amongst like-minded people that did not see it as sport to belittle those that came to offer their help. One day, as such things tend to happen, there sat together a few to a many clueless people to give each other stability in the ongoing and disastrous drought, when one of them cried, "Look there in the TV, there is our Lord Seer." "Indeed, there he is," cried another, and "Silence! Turn up the volume, lad," added another. True enough, there was the seer speaking as calm as ever into the camera. Well, when one is to understand what caused this drought, then one first needs to know how the phenomenon of rain occurs within the country. Silence. "We were hoping you could inform us about this," the interviewer suddenly chimed up, to encourage the seer to continue speaking. "Fair enough. Rain occurs when there is enough humidity in the atmosphere. Only where does this humidity come from? The short answer is from the trees. As most folks here, however, will not be content with such a short answer, I will elaborate a little on the details. A tree is a rainmaker, especially deep-rooting deciduous trees. The leafy foliage of a large old oak reaches far beyond the area covered by the thickest parts of the stem and must be maintained. To feed all those leaves, a tree needs water. And so the roots dig deep into the earth, where they may even reach groundwater. From all the way down there, water will be transported to the highest regions of this tree's reality to keep alive all those leaves. "Only what does this have to do with rain?" the interviewer unwisely interrupted the interviewed. Calm down, man. I'm getting to the point. But first, I must give the audience, as well as yourself apparently, some background information. And when I may continue with my tale without interruptions, then all the clues you need to understand what is happening will reveal themselves to you. All right. Leaves sweat, especially during hot days. According to biologists, this is part of a process called photosynthesis. But I personally don't give a rat's ass about that formula. Fact is that trees sweat out moisture into the atmosphere. This process is also known as evapotranspiration. E equals energy in the form of heat. Vapo means vapor. Transpiration means to sweat. On very hot days, all trees emit warm, humid air from their leafy foliage, which begins to accumulate in the troposphere until the air is saturated and cannot take up any more moisture. This is when it usually starts to rain. The seer remains silent. The interviewer dares a follow-up question. So far so good, but why then has it stopped raining? The seeing man looks at the interviewer with an irritated but clear gaze. Then he continues, because of the deforestation, man! One tree does not make rain, and what remains of our forests is not enough to saturate the surrounding atmosphere with moisture. Cities are stone deserts, and everything heats up. The surface of cars gets incredibly hot when the sun shines on it, correct? Roofs and asphalt as well. Ever walked barefoot over concrete during a hot sunny day? The heat burns your soles right off. Even batteries of phones emit warmth when they get charged. All this heat accumulates and leads to a heat bubble which rises into the air and pushes out cold air. Without the mixing of cold and hot air pockets, there is no real weather anymore, and rain becomes scarce to obsolete. Deforestation, deforestation, deforestation until it stops raining. And only to clarify this while I'm at it, rain must pour down for hours on end. A bit of mist or a drizzle is not enough to fill large rivers or raise the groundwater level. Understood? The young man holding the microphone stays silent, giving the man of the hour enough time to gather himself so that he may continue in a calm manner. Your governors in their fine suits act as though this is all part of climate change, while the term climate change is just a distraction from the fact that all our rain-making forests are slowly diminishing. Wood is a giant business. Do you believe that any forestry department cares about the health of forests, when it consists of nothing but economists that stare at the numbers? Countries want money. The mayors want money. The consumeristic populace wants cheap electricity, internet, and better roads. How is all of this paid? Well, pushing economy. Selling wood, solar panels instead of funding roof greening on a large scale. marketing and advertising heat pumps instead of hardening by showering cold, highlighting pseudo-environmental protection measures so that nobody focuses on the real danger, deforestation. And for what? Financing some new fancy bridge? Black screen, the TV switched off and all is quiet. Then from the silence one raises his voice. I believe we have looked away long enough. How about opening our eyes instead of wasting away on the inside? And the moral of the story? The drought, dear people, is a real community effort. The end.